In Manchester, England, a bunch of deadly terrorists is glued to the TV like it's the season finale of their favorite show. A terrorist leader is threatening to avenge America for their wars on the Muslim world and is serious about blowing stuff up in the US and Europe. But guess what? The cops catch wind of their hideout and decide to crash the party. The SWAT team is unto them. Cue the chaos. The terrorists, anticipating their arrival, decide to go out with a bang, literally, by blowing up their own apartment along with some unfortunate officers. In Iraq, we meet our man, Roger Ferris, aka CIA's finest. His job, catching bad guys. His boss, Ed Hoffman, gives him the lowdown. Ferris then teams up with his buddy Bassam, who's like his partner in crime fighting. Together, they dive headfirst into the world of Iraqi terrorism. Ferris gets wind from Bassam about the scaredy cat terrorist named Nazar, who's having second thoughts about his big suicide bombing debut. Poor guy's not too keen on blowing himself to smithereens. So Ferris and Bassam are like, we gotta meet this Nazar dude and get him to talk. So they are on their way to a deserted area to meet Nazar. But guess who's lurking in the background? The CIA, of course, watching everything like a hawk. Ferris tells them to pull their drones back like, come on, guys, let us handle this without the overhead surveillance, okay? So, they finally get to meet Nazar, who spills the beans about some seriously juicy evidence against Al-Salim. But here's the kicker. Nazar's not into this whole terrorist gig anymore. He has a PhD and wants a cozy life in the good old USA. Nazar gives Ferris a CD that has Al-Salim talking about war against America and Europe. Ferris calls Ed and tells him about the video. He requests Ed for asylum for Nazar, or else he will be killed in a few days as the terrorists are already looking for him. But, oh no, Ed's like, asylum? Nah, buddy. We'll take your info, but asylum's off the table. He tells Ferris to cut him loose. So, Ferris is stuck between a rock and a hard place. He's got this guy with the goods, but his boss ain't budging on the asylum deal. Meanwhile, they're tailing Nazar through a market, thinking they've got everything under control, when suddenly, out of nowhere, comes a sketchy black van driving through the streets. Nazar gets on his bike to leave, but a few armed men get out of the van and start firing at him. The men pick up wounded Nazar and load him in the van, fearing for a blown cover. Ferris makes the split-second decision and sends Nazar packing to the great beyond. However, furious at Ed's refusal to act on the information Nazar provided, Ferris and Bassam decide to go to the safe house in Ballad, which Nazar had told them about. They roll up just in time to witness terrorists trying to barbecue some evidence. Ferris ain't having any of that, so he changes his clothes, tells Bassam to shoot him if he is captured, and goes to the safe house. He approaches a guy and asks for help as his car broke down. More men come out, and Bassam is all set with his target and shoots. Ferris gets his gun out, and there's an intense shootout between them. Meanwhile, Bassam gets in the car and is on the line with the headquarters like, hey, we're in a bit of a pickle here. Could use some backup. The next thing you know, helicopters are buzzing overhead like angry hornets. Bassam reaches the spot and gets Ferris out of an explosion. He tries to grab a few CDs, but Bassam manages to shove him in the car. So, they try to make a break for it, but the bad guys are hot on their tail. Ferris is in a fierce shootout with them, while waiting for the backup to do their thing. The backup team blows one of the cars up, and just when you think they might actually make it out in one piece, BAM, RPG to the ride, and Bassam's out of the game. Next thing Ferris knows, he's waking up in a US military hospital in Qatar, feeling like he got hit by a freight train. But does he take a breather? Nah. Hoffman's like, take a week of vacation before your next trip to Amman, Jordan. But Ferris is all, not boss. I've got a job to do. Off to Jordan he goes, and is picked up by a new CIA sidekick named Skip. Later, they hit up the embassy, and Ferris takes the reins like a cowboy wrangling a bull. From other intelligence Ferris harvested from the Ballad safe house, it locates an Al-Salim safe house in Jordan. Before you know it, he takes over the case of Al-Salim as ordered by Ed. Ferris arranges to meet and negotiates a collaboration with Hani Salam, head of the Jordanian General Intelligence Directorate. Ferris gains the respect of Hani Salam based on his ability to speak traditional Arabic fluently. Salam also perceives Ferris to be more thoughtful and intelligent than the usual field operatives the Americans use. Ferris pulls out all the stops to convince Hani to join the party, flashing photos and evidence of the training safe house in Amman like a sleuth salesman. Hani agrees to work with Ferris, but before they part ways, Hani's got some words of wisdom. Never lie to me, Ferris. The next day rolls around, and Ferris is playing detective with Skip at the safe house, with Hani's man in the loop. But lo and behold, Skip spots Zad having contact with one of the terrorists. It turns out old Hoffman sent him without Ferris even knowing. His worst nightmares come true when Zad's identity gets blown. But fear not, our hero Ferris springs into action, chasing down the terrorist like a man possessed. He catches up on the guy and after a brief fight, kills him in such a manner that one might believe the death to be random. Ferris gets a not-so-friendly greeting from some guard dogs, though he manages to get away. He is rushed to the hospital and finds himself in the care of Aisha, who's got just a thing to soothe those dog-induced wounds. Fast forward to the U.S. Embassy, where Ferris and Ed are having a showdown over the phone. Ferris lays down the law, making it crystal clear. Hands off my mission, Ed, because you're going to blow our cover with your side mission. Looks like things are about to get even spicier in the spy world. Ferris gets summoned to Hani's office, but instead of a friendly chat, they're greeted by the echoes of a man's screams. Turns out it's Zad, the guy who nearly exposed their cover, all thanks to Hoffman's meddling. Hani spills the beans about Zad getting a good old punishment and forces Ferris to watch. Now, off to the land of bicycles and windmills, Amsterdam. This dude is scavenging for treasure in trash bins. He finds a piece of paper with a bombastic surprise and puts it in his pocket. A shady guy lurks around a crowded marketplace fiddling with his phone. Boom goes the dynamite, literally, at the spot mentioned on that mysterious paper. Somewhere unknown, Al-Salim cozies up near a fireplace, watching the news with a contented face. Hani picks up Ferris and explains that he recognized one of the men from Ferris's files earlier, a former small-time criminal Mustafa Karami. Hani takes Ferris into the desert, where he has Karami. Turns out, Karami's part of Al-Salim's fan club. But instead of giving him the boot, Hani strikes a deal to keep him in the loop as their inside man. Talk about turning a sticky situation into a sweet deal. Meanwhile, Ed swings by Ferris's place. With innocent lives on the line and the threat of more explosions looming like a dark cloud, Ed decides it's time to kick things up a notch. Ed and Ferris meet with Hani, pitching his brilliant idea. Let's nab Karami and squeeze him like a lemon for info on Al-Salim. But Hani's not buying it, saying that's just not his style, adding that Karami knows nothing right now, and he will interrogate him when the right time comes. Though Ed tries his best to negotiate to give him Karami, Hani won't budge. Back at the apartment, Ferris warns Ed not to touch Karami and ruin the operation. But does Ed listen? Nope. He's got his own playbook, and sends Skip on a mission to kidnap Karami. They start tailing him, but Karami pulls a Houdini act, disappearing into the shadows faster than a bolt of lightning. Meanwhile, Ferris visits the clinic and gets another rabies shot. He also manages to score a casual afternoon out at the refugee camp with Aisha. When they are on their way back, they're confronted by Hani's men and take him to Al-Salim's safe house, which is now burning to ashes. Ferris is wondering what the heck just happened. Next thing you know, Ferris is face to face with Hani, who's madder than a wet cat. He's grilling Ferris, demanding to know if he knows about this mess. Ferris says he does not know anything about it, but Hani's not buying it, giving Ferris an ultimatum: get out of Jordan in 12 hours or else. Cut to Ferris in Washington, like a hurricane of fury. He's ready to tear Ed for messing up their operation and getting him banned from entering Jordan. But amid their heated exchange, Ferris pulls a Hail Mary and pitches a wild idea. Fake bomb explosion time by another terrorist group. The plan? Suspecting Al-Salim is motivated more by pride than ideology. He will come out of hiding and attempt to contact the other terrorists, and that's when they get him. So, Ferris puts on his detective hat and teams up with a hacker to find the perfect fall guy for their little bomb charade. They settle on Omar Siddiqui, an architect, who's about to become the unwitting star of their staged explosion extravaganza. Fast forward to Dubai, where Ferris approaches Omar and asks him to design a bank. Ferris's man takes pictures of him to put their plan into action. Later, when Omar is out of the hotel, Ferris waltzes into Omar's hotel room and accesses Omar's laptop, courtesy of his hacker pal, giving them access to the keys. They cook up some fake emails, conjure up counterfeit bank accounts, and sprinkle in some fake money transfers for good measure, all to make Omar look like the mastermind behind the big boom. But just when Ferris is about to go back to the U.S., Ed tells him that Hani wants him back in Amman. Ferris, being the smooth operator he is, swings by Hani's office for a heart-to-heart. Hani dishes out apologies like candy at Halloween, stressing the importance of not messing things up again. Ferris decides not to tell him about Siddiqui's little secret. Meanwhile, Ferris drops by the hospital to catch up with Aisha, and on her request, goes to meet her sister and nephews. But during lunch, things get a bit tense when her sister starts her interrogation about his job as a political advisor. Later, Hani is with Ferris and shares his suspicions that Omar Siddiqui, a Jordanian architect, is a terrorist. He shows Ferris the pictures which were taken in Dubai, but Ferris feigns ignorance. Ferris then calls up the hacker and asks him to send an email out from Omar's mail ID. In Turkey's U.S. military base, the soldiers get some unclaimed corpses from the morgue to use them as casualties. Ferris calls up Omar and asks him to meet his chief engineer in Turkey to discuss some issues about insulation. The plan is to establish that Omar was there in Turkey when the blast happened. Next thing you know, the news is buzzing with stories of the bomb blast, with headlines bigger than a superhero blockbuster. Al-Salim takes the bait, ordering his crew to find the culprit, who's running a bigger terrorist group than his. Meanwhile, poor Omar is freaking out over all the messages he is getting and the fake emails. He is now running for his life. Ferris tells Ed that he is bringing in Omar as he is in danger, but Ed's having none of it. Ignoring the boss's orders, Ferris sets out to protect Omar himself with Skip. But when Ferris finally catches up with Omar, the guy is so scared he's practically jumping out of his skin. Despite Ferris's best efforts to reassure him, Omar takes off in his car. And before you know it, Al-Salim's goons are after him, leading to a shootout. In the end, Omar's innocent, but it's too little, too late. He ends up in a trash bin, a victim of someone else's gameplay. So Ferris, feeling like a fish out of water, decides he's had enough of the games they are playing and wants to throw in the towel. But just when he reaches his apartment, he finds an envelope with a picture of him and Aisha. He's off like a shot to her place, only to find it empty with her phone on the table. Distraught and desperate for help, Ferris spills the beans to Hani about the whole Omar Siddiqui mess. But Hani's not exactly feeling charitable, giving Ferris the cold shoulder because he lied to him. Meanwhile, Ed's touching down in Jordan, ready to lend a hand. Ferris gets a message on Aisha's phone to call a number. Ferris gives a call to the number, where a man answers and asks him to meet at an unknown location. He is then loaded in a van to another location in Syria and left him there. A little later, a number of SUVs come with armed individuals. They know that they are being watched, so Ferris is surrounded by the SUVs, which circle him to create an obscuring dust cloud before picking him up. The dust cloud blocks Ed's view, so that he cannot determine which of the SUVs, now headed in different directions, is carrying Ferris. Ferris, bound and head covered, in the middle of some terrorist camp. And who should waltz in but Al-Salim himself? Ferris asks him about Aisha's whereabouts, but he says someone has lied to him and that he has been double-crossed. They have a heated exchange of words and even argue about how Al-Salim's ideology is so wrong. Ferris sees Karami standing behind. He tells Al-Salim that someone among his men betrayed him and works with the head of Jordanian intelligence. But instead of a pat on the back, he gets a front-row seat to a torture show, complete with finger-severing action. Just when Ferris thinks it can't get any worse, Al-Salim decides it's time to wrap things up with a little execution party. Al-Salim walks out of the place as the other pin Ferris down on the table and start chanting a prayer. But before the festivities can kick off, in swoops the Jordanian police with Hani saving Ferris just in the nick of time. As for Al-Salim, well, let's just say his getaway plans hit a snag when Hani's man gets him in the car. Fast forward to Ferris, lying up in a hospital bed. Hani waltzes in and drops the bombshell that he's the one who nabbed Aisha and orchestrated Ferris's capture by Al-Salim using Karami as a go-between. Later, Ed swings by with a cushy desk job offer, but Ferris isn't having it. Having lost the will to fight in this particular war, he quits and decides to stay in Amman. He's got unfinished business to take care of, even if it means risking life and limb. As Ferris is buying sweets for Aisha, he sees drones monitoring him. Ed tells his crew to leave Ferris alone, as he is living his own life now.